The 2024 fantasy season is kicking up dust. Where did we stumble? What trends can we attach to for 2025? Strap in for episode 1 because it's about to go down. Sights and sounds and edges found. You will now get down with the Underground, the Dynasty Underground, the show that goes to the depths of the Dynasty landscape. I am Trav, hosting and West Coastin'. This show is brought to you by the Undroppables, and with me tonight, my fellow rebels of the Underground. If you've seen Undroppables content, you likely know one Mr. Jax Falcone. He is the host of the Undrafted podcast. His government name is Scott Boulanger. Jax, is this sick or what?
Spoken like a true Canadian. I love that shit. Let's
Oui.
go, baby. I'm pretty excited, man. I mean, I got the host. I've always wanted my own, just host, just a guy just ripping it, and no better than the rhymes off the top right there. That's fantastic.
Hey, that is what I do, Jax. Yeah, and you are usually sitting in the host chair when we podcast together. So this is quite a little treat for you, I am sure. I hope I do it justice. And on my other side tonight, if you guys notice, I had to take the sweater off already because it's getting hot in here, fellas. This is the man that makes you process the process from the corner office with the view, Mr. Joe Kuvetakis. How you doing tonight, my man?
I am reeling, if we're being honest. Lost a few championships. It's Monday Night Football of Week 17 just concluded, but I've been excited about doing this with you gentlemen for a very long time, and I definitely need a host and technical person because I don't know how to do any of that stuff. So thank God for you two.
Yeah, man. Well, I will be on the ones and twos, and we're definitely going to talk about that championship week in 1 second. Like you said, Joe, the Detroit Lions just finished up a W in week 17 over the San Francisco 49ers. Just want to remind anyone who's listening that we are posted up on the Undroppables YouTube channel. Please make sure you subscribe, like, and leave a comment. One thing that we really want to do, fellas, we really want to build a community around this show. Get some people around it, start engaging with some people who enjoy the work we do and like playing Dynasty fantasy football like we do. So if you're about it, then be about it and let us know about it in the comments. So find all of our socials in the descriptions, fellas. I'm not going to go through all the socials and stuff. We're going to pitter patter here. And of course, make sure you follow the Undroppables on the social medias as well. But Joe, first I wanted to kick it to you to kind of lay out the vibe of this show. And Jax, I'd like you to feel free to jump in after the fact with your interpretation and what you're excited about here. So Joe, this is the Dynasty Underground episode 1. We're super excited to bring this to the Dynasty people. It is the first few minutes after the season has ended for fantasy gamers, and Dynasty doesn't sleep. So we talked about this a lot in the group chat beforehand. We put a lot of work into what we wanted to bring with this show. And I said it to the fellas that I thought you kind of encapsulated it the best. And so I wonder if you'd like to tell our listeners kind of what they can expect from the Dynasty Underground and where we can kind of find that edge for them.
Yeah, well, so as the name of the show indicates, this is not going to be a mainstream show, right? This one's for the sickos. That's why we're launching the literal night that the fantasy football season has ended, because while 2024 season is still going, we still got the playoffs and all of that. The 2025 dynasty season just started. So each show, some combination of us will be guiding you through the offseason, topical stuff like the Senior Bowl, which is in a couple of weeks, offseason moves we think will be impactful, most importantly, trading and rookies. And I think the rookie analysis, although it's just getting started, but I feel like rookies and trading are really the lifeblood of Dynasty. So having a strong foundation of knowing who the prospects are is something that you get to take with you into future seasons. So when, say, like a Marvin Mims pops off at the end of year 2, you remember he ran 4.38 in college and at a breakout age of 18 and a half. So you have a pretty good hunch that it's probably not a fluke. But so much of rookie analysis comes down to process. Jax writes the anatomy series every year. Him, Chalk, Wiz, and Coder, Jay Wood, all put together the UN model for us. I write a series, as you alluded to, called Processing the Process. And of course, Trav is our host with the most. the level-headed Sherpa that's going to keep us on the rails when Jack starts yelling at me for liking the Xavier Legetts of the world. But so
You're welcome.
so, I don't know how many of you heard Tom Brady fumble through the teach a man a fish metaphor yesterday, on Sunday, I should say. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to teach our listeners how to process information to run your dynasty teams, and we're going to do it by doing what we love, which is talking football with the boys. So consider this your audio group chat for the Undroppables.
Well, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And, we're definitely going to talk some trash. It's funny you mentioned the underground. It's definitely, starting at the, the first, moment that the 2025 sort of dynasty season kicks off. It's so true. This is when all the real dynasty heads are like starting, right? So there's a little bit of a break, I would say, but this break of sort of dynasty, stuff that we do starts with the prospects, and I've already started the prospects. I literally had sent you guys something in the group chat, but I've got a sick beat that I need to get off my chest, and I'll do so in a minute. But man, oh man, what a finish to the season! With the Lions not even needing to play, and they come out there and just drop 40 with Jahmyr Gibbs going all over the place. And I was so shocked that they played their starters. What did you guys think of all that? That was freaking nuts.
Wild. I couldn't
It's
believe
just
it.
that's so Dan Campbell. That is so exactly what he said he wanted the team to be from day one. And so seeing the manifestation of his personality coming out in the team, and going out there and dominating what's a meaningless game for them is just it's just awesome.
It was so cool.
Yeah. Yep. Good on you, Dan Campbell. Still biting kneecaps off to this day. So, Joe, I kind of want to dive into that championship week a little bit more because Twitter was definitely a buzz about it. And I think for me, it seemed to drag out with games Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I felt like I had a really hard time knowing what game was what day and who was playing when and who I was looking to get points from when. I had bets all over the place and I didn't know when I was, so it was really all over the place for me. And I didn't even really have any skin in the championship game as far as title managed teams. And we'll talk about that in the next segment for sure, because it's not necessarily something I am shouting from the rooftops, but I guess you could call these rooftops, right, Joe? But tell me about the tilt, because I know you had a couple of championship games as well. And I don't know what that must have felt like for you, because we've never really experienced a championship week like this before. It must have been tough.
Oh God. I busted this guy out. I don't know if you can see that. This is for those listening on audio, this is fine dog. If you're familiar with the meme, I actually have the stuffed animal, and it's just for days or just for weeks like the one we just had. This was probably the hardest week to manage of my life. I was in 3 championship games and I lost all 3. So I'm reeling. I'm reeling.
Ooh,
Yeah,
Joe.
lost. Yeah, exactly.
Brutal.
But starting from Wednesday, right? I had to start making suboptimal decisions, right? Because you got guys that are going on Wednesday, you got guys that you think might be hurt that aren't playing until Sunday. You're not going to know. And in a 12-team start 11 dynasty league, it's really hard to figure out what you're going to do because you don't have that many viable options, right? So yeah, made a couple of mistakes, not starting guys on Wednesday, waiting for guys on Sunday that did not show up or, got the flu like Tony Pollard. And so, it's just a bad beat. We've had a lot of talk about, should we move championship week up a week? But I don't think that works because we still got buys in week 14 now with this new 18-week season. So I don't know what the answer is, but God, just hopefully, I think Christmas next year falls on a Thursday. I already looked into it. So hopefully that won't be as bad, but that's what we're talking about. I was like, how can we make sure this never happens again? This is a nightmare.
And
He did say I checked. He said I've already looked into it.
Yeah.
That terminology is exactly
that
the way.
is how you dig
Yeah.
deep on Dynasty. Be 1 year ahead.
Oh my
I
God. I've already looked into it.
Yeah.
We should put out Christmas for like the next 5 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was brutal.
Well,
I mean, so wait, did you have any did you have trade deadlines in all 3 of those leagues, Joe?
Had trade deadlines in 2 of them. In one of them, I did not. But it was, by the time we got news on Pollard, I was scrambling. I was doing a little weekend getaway with the wife, and I was like, I can't pull off getting a trade done and also not infuriating the missus. So
That's the hardest part too. It's like Christmas, Thursday, Friday, no, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. It was just kind of nuts. Like you had to be paying attention every morning to and they would rule someone out on Saturday, on Thursday, right before the game. You're like, shit, does that matter for my Thursday decisions? And all that stuff was crazy. Most of the leagues I try to play in don't have trade deadlines, so trading feverishly, and it just was. It was so much fun. I love it. I ended up taking home 3 ships, which is not
Attaboy.
great for me considering 20 leagues. It's okay. It
That's
was all
pretty
right.
good,
It was okay. Won 3 out of 6 that I was in, so that's kind of just brought home a little bit of positive EV, but nothing too crazy. 2 years ago, I think I won like 0. And last year, I think I won like, over 50% of my leagues, which was crazy. So,
That's huge.
you can run really bad, run really good. This is I ran just fine. And, however, I did have the fracture tilt, the absolute fracture tilt. So I've got to tell you, I'm in the
Okay.
Dynasty Game Theory Invitational. You're going to love this one. Dynasty Game Theory Invitational. It's kind of a big league for me. It's a 14-team league, and when I did that league, I was like, who are the sharpest people I can get to join one league? Like, it's crazy. It's murderer's row. I mean, JJ Zacharyson, Scott Connor, Shane. You name someone, you're like, oh shit, they're in there. Graham Barfield. Like, it's a stupid league, like where it's just kind of ridiculous, right? So I love that because it's for money, but not a ton. It's not the money, it's the fucking principle, right? This is one of those where you're like bragging rights, the whole thing. So I'm in the championship game. I make a bunch of trades to, I get Jonnu Smith and Rashad White, who both kind of bust out on me. I've got Joe Mixon busts, Geno Smith busts, Achane busts. Like I'm just busting everywhere. And, it's a pretty deep league. And we're down 60 points tonight. I'm down 60 points tonight. We've got just Amon-Ra and Purdy. And so Purdy comes out house on fire. We're down 60. We're just coming back. We're coming back. Amon-Ra scores the touchdown, really puts me in position. Purdy throws the pick, and basically I was down by 0.1 or something. Throws the pick. I come back down 3 or whatever, down 2, whatever. I'm coming back, and I'm within 0.1, and Purdy takes himself out of the game where all he needed was one more completion or one more anything, and I win the championship. But he comes out and he's like, "Nah, the elbow just fucking look. I can't even throw. I'm such a. I mean, yes, yes. I was watching my wife and kids like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm trying to not act like a complete asshole in the house, and that is how I lost the Dynasty Game Theory Invitational by 0.2 or whatever. 185 point to 185 point. Like, I made the huge comeback and just fell short. Absolute crush.
If I didn't have a bunch of electronics in front of me, I would pour one out for that, Jax. I would pour one out.
Yep.
Yeah. All 3 of my teams had the combination of Achane and Terry McLaurin on them. So that was
a bunch of Terry McLaurin too.
That was devastating. Yep. And then one of them I had to scramble because of the Pollard injury, and I plugged Kendre Miller in, who of course got concussed in the first quarter. So it's just like, well, that one's dead.
I wonder if it was worth it. Shane Manila, who's just awesome to be in a league with, because he'll trade you anytime. He's always paying attention, even if he's out of it. He's the greatest. Here's just shout out to Shane Manila. If you don't know Shane, then you're not. How can you be a fan of this show and not a fan of their show? So anyway, he he's always there for me, in terms of a trade partner. So he's the one I traded. I think I traded him Chuba Hubbard and Dallas Goedert for Jonnu and Rashad White. I had 2 guys not playing for 2 guys playing. It's a deep league, 14 team, yada, yada. So it was a fair trade. I felt like he kind of won the trade if it wasn't championship week. I thought it was a very generous deal. I might have given him a couple like thirds or something. But in any event, then I'm like, fuck, I need to get off this Achane situation because of, what's his name? Tyler Huntley or whatever,
Yeah.
So I'm like, I offer something around Achane and Gibbs, and he basically sends back the Achane and my 27 first for Gibbs. And I'm like, that's a little expensive, but had I done that, I would have won, I suppose. So maybe is it worth your 27 first to make that trade? Probably was. And that's kind of the Dynasty Underground, Dynasty game theory, Dynasty thought process that, like, if you make that trade and you still lose, you're like, what have I done?
Mm-hmm.
So this is why I love, and I'll say it so loudly, I love no trade deadlines, because it put pressure on me to make a play. And yeah, you could be the other guy going, well, it's not fair, he gets Gibbs. I had to make a play. And so I love those decisions. And, here we are. I'm a loser.
Well, we're all losers playing fantasy football at one point or another, buddy. So it's okay. And you still got a couple of titles, which is good. You're talking about that trading there. I do just want to give a plug to the Undrafted Fantasy Football Podcast, Jax.
Sure.
Of course, you do host it, and prime time for the Undrafted is coming up within probably the next couple of weeks here over the off season. But you and I recently did talk about some playoff trading with those no deadline leagues. So highly encourage folks to go back and check that out. And any of the other Undroppables content that you can find, undroppables.com. And thank you very much for checking out this show, because it's been a bit of a labor of love. I personally have really wanted to get back behind the microphone. So we got a couple of months planning under our belt for this bad boy, and we're excited to kick it off. And so we're going to get into our next segment here, guys, and we're going to talk about our biggest mistakes of 2024. Some shows right now, guys, they're going to be calling this their New Year's resolution. That is bullshit. We're not about that here. These are just the moves that we did or didn't make. We don't have to put a New Year's resolution. We are just going to be better on a daily basis. Maybe some waiver ads that we missed. Maybe, a trade that we didn't pull the trigger on in the playoffs when we could have maybe won the championship, Jax. All the fuck ups, let's just call it, boys. This is where we fucked up in 2024. Okay, fellas, we are talking about where we made our biggest mistakes of 2024. And I'm going to start, guys, because I have a good one kind of leading into the Dynasty offseason for folks to make sure that they are remembering. And what I did this year, guys, it's more so what I didn't do. And I didn't put my in-season money where my mouth was, fellas. I had a great time in the offseason. I was podding with Wiz. We had a bunch of content flowing at the Undroppables. We were analyzing those rookies. Great time doing that. Still made some trades in the season, still kind of setting good lineups and stuff. Very happy with some teams and things like that. But I feel like, guys, I could have worked a little bit harder in the outskirts of my team to make those smaller moves that made a bigger difference down the stretch. I think what I did was maybe relied on what I thought were strong teams and strong depth a little bit too much. And I wasn't continuously churning that bottom of the roster, which is something that I always talk about. And I wasn't kind of putting enough effort in there and invested enough in the in-season stuff as much as I was off-season. I think for us as Dynasty gamers, diehards, if you will, we know that the off-season is the fun stuff. But I was only in 8
I've got a
leagues,
solution
guys.
for you, though. I've got a solution for you. Either invest more money into your leagues, like
Right.
if you start investing, $1,000, $10,000 into each league, you'll pay a little bit more attention. Either that's option one.
Canadian dollars or American?
Well,
Yeah,
the dollars
monopoly money up here. Jesus.
I'm only this is a bit. Or option two would be to get rid of your family altogether. So those would be the two ways I think you could pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah, 100%. And both are not options. And so, yeah, that's just something that I want to do, is try and make sure that I am finding the time to make those little moves here and there. Like, I was still happy with some that I did for the future, but I think I could have made more now moves earlier in the season that would have made it so I had more than one of 8 teams above 500 this season, guys. It was a bad one for me. And so basically just make sure that you are allocating as much time in the season as you are to the off season to making some of those roster moves. We definitely allocate time to waivers. We definitely allocate time to setting our rosters and whatnot. But team building doesn't stop when the season starts, is basically what I'm trying to say. And so keep working at that even early in the season. It's not too early to start shuffling some things up if you have to. So, fellas, you got any comments on that, or anything that you do other than, becoming a millionaire overnight, or not having a family that could help you do this?
Those are good ideas.
Just the actionable advice like that. In,
Go
yeah,
ahead, Joe.
yeah. In terms of churning, I mean, yeah, that's a critical thing. I'm always looking for just little micro edges, like who's desperate for picks and who can I like slide some fourths and fifths to for
Adam
particularly
Thielen.
yeah. I traded an Adam Thielen and got like a fourth and like Tyrod Taylor for him. Stuff like that where it's just
Yeah.
like I have no use for this guy beyond this season. I don't have
And
any use
that's a
for
good
him.
trade for whoever got Adam Thielen potentially. Like
Yeah,
Adam Thielen
Totally.
was in the roster that just beat me in that Dynasty Game 3 Invitational. So, and he scored a friggin' touchdown on the first drive or whatever it was. So, I mean, there's a lot of pain there, and for a fourth and Tyrod Taylor, that's great production. So,
yeah, exactly. But what I do to do that is primarily just you target teams that just suffered injuries to
yep.
starters or important players, right? And as soon as they have that, they're tilting, and then you just start offering them players for draft capital, particularly guys you're going to be getting rid of. It kind of depends on your situation too, though, right? Are you a rebuilding team or are you a contender? And you got to just make those calls. But injuries is probably the primary target in season. Usually our waiver wires in the kinds of leagues we're in are pretty barren. So we churn through that, particularly looking for running backs in season. I don't think you're going to find much more than that. But yeah, I'd say that's my 2 cents there. What about you, Jax?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I bet you there's some of, certainly my listeners and our listeners now that are listening to this going, bro, I need to fucking put on the brakes. I'm doing way too many, moves. I know there's just dudes that are like so active, and that's a lot of our listenership for sure. But there are people I know who are paying a lot of attention, who are also a little scared stiff. They're afraid to make mistakes. I know that a lot of people are afraid to make mistakes, and I play with guys who are not. Shane is one of them. CMFK is another one. These guys that play with reckless abandon, are really fun to watch play Dynasty because they'll just do anything. They'll just rip off 4 or 5 trades in a row. And you're like, dude, their whole team is different. So I think it's it's kind of recognizing which one you are. Are you a little bit too scared and too, risk averse, or are you a little too reckless? Or if you're not paying enough attention to those details, it's like identifying which one you are, and then just kind of making sure that you throttle up or throttle down based on where you're at.
Yeah, you brought up Shane a couple times. So just as a quick aside, early in the season, he made me an offer, Marvin Harrison Jr. for Marvin Harrison Jr. for Brian Thomas Jr. And at the time, it's like Marv was obviously the number one drafted wide receiver and unanimous first non-quarterback in every league that was taken. And like I thought really hard about it, but that's the kind of trade offer he made. I declined. Thank God I declined. But it was early enough in the season. I had seen enough from BTJ and had enough conviction. Was a little starting to get bad vibes on Marv. This is probably like week 3 or week 4, right? But so yes, that's exactly the kind of guy he is. He gets a little bit of information, a little bit of data, and is not afraid to act quickly on that data.
Bingo.
Yeah, definitely. Shaner is a rascal. That is for sure. So
Rascal.
it's
I
a
love
pretty
that.
good
That's
word
right.
for him, though, right? That is a
No,
good
it's
word
true.
for Shane, for
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, he is
rascal.
a
You're a little
rascal.
rascal.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, Joe, I love that, and I love that you brought like a real life example because that's kind of a microcosm of what listeners can expect, right? Is we're going to bring you real life stuff that we're going through, and we're going to tell you about why we made those decisions. So, very good, very good. I'm going to keep it with you, Joe, to give me one of your biggest mistakes of 2024.
Well, I've got a lot, but why don't we start with Josh Allen versus Mahomes? Uh, I was in 2 startups this year where I had the number 1 pick, and in both of them, I took Mahomes over Josh Allen. In the offseason, I think it was fairly easy to justify, right? Josh Allen had just lost Diggs. He had a wide receiver room that was completely in flux. We're talking about Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel, right? So I didn't know what to expect. I'd never really seen him be great without Stephon Diggs. And so I was a little nervous about him. And with Mahomes, it looked like he was going to have Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy. First time in his career, he was going to have 3 good to great wide receivers to throw to. So, in retrospect, hindsight's 2020, right? In retrospect, how could I have known that he was going to lose Hollywood Brown in the preseason, that he was going to lose Rashee Rice in week 4, and that it was just going to be a total grind for him all season? And then, on the flip side with Josh Allen, I failed to see that he was going to be able to elevate everybody around him, right? And for me, this season, Josh Allen went from like elite to the pantheon of quarterbacks, particularly fantasy quarterbacks, right? Where I always thought he was good to great. But after this season, seeing the way he made that offense work with, guys that as they were just kind of winging it out there, really took it to another level. So I have some huge regrets about those two startups and taking Mahomes over Allen. But, we're talking about the GOAT versus maybe like the fantasy GOAT, right?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because kind of something that I had previously talked about, which I thought we were kind of going to see a bit of a change in, was that especially for the KC receivers that previously we got excited about them, but I think the shakeout was eventually that just we didn't end up by the end of the season wanting any of them because they all were putting up like 700-yard seasons and 6 touchdowns or something, with Travis Kelce being the main piece that you want. And I love your point about Josh Allen's ability to take those guys to the next level, because we didn't necessarily see that with him early in his career. He was still pretty good, but then you got Stephon Diggs, which took him to the next level. And we kind of thought we were going to see that step down when Stephon Diggs left, and we absolutely have not. It's just been more of a highlight of how good Josh Allen is. So I don't know if that was necessarily a terrible process, especially seeing that the people that were added to that offense for KC. But yeah, I think it's a decent lesson to be learned, I guess, about these elite talents, Joe.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to add, right? The lesson there is, what's the mistake I made with both guys, right? I overvalued the wide receiver position on his team. I overvalued situation rather than taking a look at them as like a fantasy asset. And I think we can get a little over our skis on that. And so that's kind of the thing I'm going to take with me, is don't think too much about situation, especially when it comes to quarterback, because great quarterbacks will, elevate the team around them and they will make the situation work. Mahomes has made it work in his own way, but God, we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
Not for fantasy, he hasn't, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Falcone, you want to give us one of yours?
Mine is my favorite. My favorite mistake, of course, being a Patriots fan, is that I said Drake. Dan Bradley, where are you? Are you watching? Because he loves that I argued with him and that he was so right. And we're both Patriots fans, and Wiz and I, Wiz, Dan, and I are on the under Undroppables group chat, and when the draft was happening, I was beside myself. I was so pissed the Patriots took Drake Maye, and now I couldn't be happier that the Patriots have Drake Maye. And, in Dynasty, I kind of made the mistake of having J.J. McCarthy over Drake Maye, in rookie drafts. And so, I didn't get any Drake Maye. I just basically traded out of that spot. I didn't really draft J.J. over him. I just felt like if I have them that close, I'll just trade back, gain value, get J.J. in some spots, which probably worked out okay too. But, I'd rather have some Drake Maye on my team for sure. And so I mean, you make those mistakes. Those are, I guess, player eval mistakes. And Sky Moore over Chris Olave, that one hurts still a little bit. You can go back in time, and I think the key is getting off those positions as quickly as possible, and understanding. Once you're wrong, be ready to be wrong. As I always say, it's the bumper sticker for the undrafted. So yeah, I'm so happy I was wrong.
Well, it's funny because you did what you wanted the Patriots to do, which is like, hey, trade back and just get another one of these guys, right? But now,
Yep,
it's funny in retrospect. But
it is funny, but yeah.
But you put your money where your mouth is. All right, so I got another one that I gotta own up to.
Okay.
Kyron Williams and Bucky Irving.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to running backs, I like big backs. I really don't like sub 200-pound backs, and I
You can't
really
deny.
hate. Yeah, exactly. And I really dislike backs that are under 195 pounds, particularly with speed scores below 90. Kyron Williams ran a 4.65, Bucky Irving ran a 4.55. And so part of my process is like, these guys just don't make the cut, right? I have like, sort of dogmatic rules about running backs. And when they don't meet a weight and speed threshold, I basically just take them off the board, or I push them so far down the board that there's
They're
no way
effectively
I'm
off
going to
the
get them.
board.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Kyron Williams finished 10th in fantasy points per game at the running back position. And Bucky Irving finished 21st. Both starters, very much starters. Kyren had 15 touchdowns, 31 catches. Bucky 41 catches, 7 touchdowns. Just I didn't see it. I didn't allow myself to see it, and so that's something I'm going to take with me into this offseason. The league is changing. The way they look at small running backs is changing. The defensive fronts are changing, and maybe it's time to revisit a long-held principle and belief as the league changes. So that's a big one for me. Taking the huge L on Kyren and Bucky.
Joe, there's another. I'm with you, by the way. I did the same thing. I basically faded Bucky past. And the crazy thing is, we were huge Bucky fans. Do you remember? Like before the combine, before the draft,
Totally.
the undroppables were like team fucking Bucky. We had Bucky Irving T-shirts. We got off of that because of size and speed and draft capital and all the stuff that we know better to listen to. We should be listening to these things, but you're right. There has to be balance. It's so hard because you want to be right. You want to not hit the landmines when you're going through draft season. But the other principle that we've got that we sort of employ and tell others to follow is when you're late in drafts, don't be drafting late round wide receivers and late round quarterbacks. I mean, because they're very unlikely to succeed for you. But a late round running back can be a Kyren Williams, can be a Bucky Irving. They actually can elevate themselves to a top 5, top 10 dynasty asset at their position, where those other positions, it's very unlikely. Tight end actually can as well. But again, you're kind of, they're also still unlikely. They just, we've seen Kittle and Kelsey come out of those areas as well. So it's possible. But yeah, so I mean, draft running backs late, and maybe it has stumbled into a few, sometimes you got to block your nose and press draft player with some of the guys that you think maybe a wasted pick, but you'd rather waste it on a running back late in your rookie draft.
Yeah.
100%.
I got one more I want to talk to you guys about. This is another big one for me. Is like I think probably the biggest Roman Wilson fanboy going into the season, and I was also that's right, and I was also a pretty big Marshawn Lloyd fanboy, and obviously both these guys failed to launch completely, and they both had something in common, which is they both got hurt in training camp and missed significant chunks of training camp. And then when the season rolled around, they were behind, first of all. But then as soon as they got some playtime, they got hurt again. So I think it's just critically important to remember this. Take this with you into next season. When your rookie player gets hurt in training camp and misses a big chunk of it, it's probably time just to get off them. You can probably recoup something close to what you paid for them because the draft is so close in everyone's mind that they think, he's still worth a second or a
second.
Third. Yeah. Yep. So when rookies get hurt in training camp, they're probably going to have a rough rookie year. And if they have a rough rookie year, then the analysis of them, basically for second year goes, the expectations go way down and the value drops with it. So just remember that. And I need
even
to
JSN.
Yeah, totally. Even JSN. I mean, it took him till this year. Now he's, become the player that we wanted him to be, but God, it was hard to sell him in the offseason and it was cheap to buy him. I bought him in a couple of places, just, fingers crossed. So it kind of depends on your situation, but when your rookies get hurt in training camp, you can recoup full value. You should take that deal.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty interesting as well because with those guys that, you draft in that second and that third round, we drafted them and we liked the talent for a reason, right? We went into the draft expecting them to be something. And so one thing that I like to do with those guys as well, because you can potentially buy those guys low if you're the buyer in that situation as well. If a guy is really coming off of them. So those could be buying situations. So don't necessarily throw your pre-draft eval out in those situations as well, because you can find a good player on the trade market. Or if your team can maybe withstand that guy in the draft, you might be more willing to take that because you don't need that first year production out of him. If you can take on that guy who's probably going to have that slow start, like a Romo Dunze potentially. Obviously, he's at the higher end of the draft than some of these guys that we're talking about, but that's a guy that you're going to take on that rough season, which is something that we were calling out at the Undroppables as well. So for me, I'm not disappointed with that rookie season that we got out of Romo Dunze. Jax, I think you had a post about that today as well.
I did.
With Rome and some of his production.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because, like, I read someone, I think it was Ian Hartitz, who's awesome, by the way. I fucking love his tweets. But, like, he basically just said something. It wasn't really negative. It just probably had a negative slant. I was like, it's a pretty good tweet. I liked it. And I was like, is it a negative or a positive for Rome Odunze right now? Like, I don't even know. Like, I think I like him, but I'm not sure. So I just tweeted a bunch of rookies who went out and posted similar numbers, 50-ish catches and 700 or 800 yards receiving, and not a ton of touchdowns. So who were those guys? It was like Torrey Holt, Calvin Johnson. But there was some other guys in there that were like, oh, DJ Moore and whatever. I just sort of went down at Jeremy Maclin, etc. And I wasn't trying to say that, oh, this is all the comps and for sure he's going to be good. I mean, there's Justin Blackman and some other ones that were first round picks that kind of fizzled and faded. Kendall Wright, whatever. I mean, but I think we all kind of agree that Rome Odunze is a talented player. I think we also agree that the Chicago team was dysfunctional to say the least, and so for those reasons, I think I'm buying Rome Odunze if someone is fading. But I mean, I'm not. Who knows, right? But that's kind of the point I guess you're making. But yeah, that was a fun tweet.
Sounds like a future show. The guys who disappointed, and we can try and buy low. I like this idea. Let's someone write that down.
Guys, there is a lot of good stuff that is going to be coming out of this podcast. So this is just the surface being scratched for any of our listeners. And I think you guys can probably attest to my potentially annoying activity in the group chat that this is something that I've been looking forward to. And so I appreciate you obliging me being a bit of a nagging wife in the group chat, boys. I'll just maybe that's my title with the Undroppables is the nagging wife of the Undroppables.
You're a good one though. You're a good one. You do a good job.
If it gets shit done.
Just get those dishes done too while you're at it, would you?
Hey, fucking, that's what a dishwasher's for, man. That's what a dishwasher. 2024.
I thought that was your name. Dishwasher.
Easy now. We're gonna end that bit right here.
Thought we wanted to have fun too, no?
Yeah.
Changed our mind on the fun part.
Depends who you're asking, Jax. Okay, so all of that stuff that you guys said makes me think about my mistake here as well. And it has to do with the 2024 class. And I leaned way too heavily into the variance of that deep wide receiver class or that deep wide receiver class. And Jax kind of made me think about this when you were talking about Drake Maye, because I think one of my takeaways there from the quarterback position is that it's okay to lean into that high variance where massive ceiling might lie with a guy like Drake Maye. But I think maybe the opposite with these wide receivers, right? Because we were enamored with that class. It was a lot of names to sift through, a lot of people with different skill sets and talents. I think this draft class covered a lot of bases from that area, I guess, but didn't necessarily do that from the talent expectations or maybe the production expectations. Because I think there's a lot of these wide receivers that there is still a candle lit for. But I'm talking about guys in the back end of the draft like Jacob Cowing, Malik Washington, Jamari Thrash, Johnny Wilson, Jermaine Burton. Like I said, there's some guys that we still have the candle burning for. But the hard part about it is that they didn't show us anything in year one to give us confidence or lack of confidence to be able to get off them, right? And so I think that candle burning is kind of keeping me on the fence a little bit with some of these guys on my roster. Whereas what I normally would have done at that point in the draft, like you said, is be attacking that running back position with as many guys as I can get and whoever is there. Like I'd be getting guys like Isaac Garendo, definitely guys like Bucky Irving. Obviously, he went up into the second in some drafts, but he was a third round draft pick routinely. And that's
Ray Davis. A guy like Ray Davis. I mean, Ray Davis is an injury away from being a league winner. I mean, that offense, if all of a sudden James Cook goes down, Ray Davis could win your league. I mean, he was winning weeks when when James Cook went down early in the season. I don't remember how many weeks. I think it was only 1 week or whatever. But Ray Davis was dope. And so. Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to lean into running back late. And, you threw Jermaine Burton into a group of guys that were, 4th and 5th rounders. And I thought Jermaine Burton was an interesting play because he was the classic risk reward play. He scored super high on our model. We loved, watching Jermaine Burton. He had amazing pedigree, great, tape, but he was a knucklehead. And it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen here? Is this knucklehead going to be a knucklehead in the pros, or is, sort of the seriousness and the bright lights going to make him sort of turn it on? And he's going to be, I mean, how many knucklehead, Josh Gordon, Chad Ochocinco, there's been a number of guys out there
Justin
that are,
Blackman.
Right. There you go. Right. So some turn out, some don't. And some, are able to sort of harness Antonio Brown, man. I mean, obviously he was a knucklehead the whole time. I mean, he had some issues in college and coming up and all the rest of it. And somehow was able to just sort of get it done on the field for enough years where he was elite and then finally danced naked in the end zone, the ultimate walk-off. But, you get my point, right? You never know exactly what you're getting, but at least you're, going with high-end talent. But once you get past a certain threshold with those wide receivers, like, dude, I love cowing or whatever, like, I'm like,
Me too.
it's like, but I basically know better than to draft. I mean, for me, actually, I would rather draft Jared Wiley and AJ Barner and all these other guys, because you never know. You might need one of these tight ends could, all of a sudden be a starter and be like, dude, he's getting 4 targets a week. That's great. Put him in. Some of these deep leagues where your tight end premium, especially tight end premium, you get 3 or 4 catches at the tight end position in a deep flex. And man, oh man, you're scoring 10, 12 points. You're like, this is great. What a great play. If they score a touchdown, right? So those players tend to be more valuable for me in those late rounds, running back and, these high end tight ends, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Although I think it's interesting because while I agree with you, Trav, in terms of like this wide receiver class and, it really fizzling after the first round of your rookie drafts, aside from like, McMillan, the same could be said for the running back position. We had a couple hits.
McMillan also very, very high in the model. So we were on
Absolutely.
McMillan.
Oh yeah, McMillions. But like aside from Tracy and Bucky Irving, those are like the 2 clear definitive hits from the running back class. But look at the guys at the top of the draft, right? Brooks, Benson, Corum, Wright, Lloyd. That was like the top 5. Bust, 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 bust. And
But
then
not
go a
really.
little further.
We'll
Huh?
see.
But not really, because
Maybe.
But
we
not
didn't
really. Yeah.
we didn't see it. All right. As far as the rookie seasons are concerned,
Totally.
they were busts.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vidal did not perform the way any of us hoped. I know in this chat room,
Mm-hmm.
Braylon Allen, looked pretty good early in the season, but then we didn't really see much more, and it seems like he kind of was starting to lose or get supplanted. I guess the guys that ended up pretty good were Ray Davis, Garendo, Estime. Again, kind of we'll see, but there are only really 2 clear hits: Tracy and Irving, and those guys were available middle of the 3rd round, early 4th round in most leagues. So I don't think it was necessarily a bad year to guess on wide receivers because your guesses at running back weren't going to be any better.
Fair.
Now the quarterback class was incredible, and we got the best tight end ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I like some of those deeper tight ends, like you mentioned, Jax. Even your boy Theo Johnson, Joe,
Right.
has
Oh, yeah.
shown some signs, and I like that AJ Barner call out as well. He's had some
Sanders
flashes.
is good. Like,
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Yeah, Theo was my my post draft. No, I think pre-draft number 2, post-draft number 3, and I wish I had just kept him at number 2.
Can confirm he was. Okay, fellas, I'm going to take us off of this segment and move us into another one. And this segment is one that it's a bit near and dear to my heart, or maybe so the title. Because Joe, you had it in the show sheet as probability versus possibility. And I felt that was very kind of like trend related. And so this is
You thought it was too nerdy. Be honest. You thought it was too nerdy.
I like it. I just feel like the name of this segment is one of the better segment names that I've come up with in my podcasting history. And so I felt like this was a good place to carry it on. So a little bit selfish, but this is going to be trend spotting. Okay, so fellas, in this segment, you guys know what the business is. We are going to be looking at some trends that are happening or that we think are going to start happening across the NFL, and we're going to talk about them. We're going to break them down, tell people if it's something they can rely on going forward or if they might want to jump off of that plank while they can. And the first one that we talked about, and I think this is a very, very good one considering the time of year, people just had some championships won from some of these players. And that would be the running back renaissance that we've seen so far this year. I think there's a bunch of factors that have kind of come together for this. We've seen a bunch of veterans at the top of the bill, guys like Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, James Conner, Aaron Jones. Like that is a solid list of veteran running backs who have been doing it for a while. And then we got some of these young names like guys like Jameer Gibbs, Devon Achane, Bijan Robinson as well. So I think there is an interesting mix of talent, and some of those older guys not seeing the cliff that we may have expected has made that pool a whole lot bigger. I think we've also seen an increase in rush volume across the league. I'm an Eagles fan, as you can see, and their run volume is absolutely astronomical this season. I think it's hovering over 60% or something like that last time I checked. So we're seeing a lot of it. And as somebody who has historically drafted running back heavy, I love to see it. And some of my teams, maybe not this season, but will be reaping those rewards. Jax, why don't you talk first about this and what you've seen from these running backs? And if you think this is something that we can continue to attach to across the league, or should we just be careful that this is a special group not seeing that cliff yet?
I think a little bit of both. It's funny because the health and the relative health of the running back position, I think, is fluky. That's fluky, especially for older backs, right? It's like, what are the chances that James Conner was going to stay healthy all year? I didn't think it was very good. I don't think it was very good. And it just so happened that he did stay healthy. I mean, what were the odds? 60%. I mean, it was better than half, maybe, but barely. In other words, it wasn't a great bet, but it was still okay, possible. The other thing I think that is kind of interesting about the running back renaissance is how much they're playing too deep, too high safety in the NFL, which is a response to the passing offenses and sort of taking off over the last 5 to 10 years. And there's a little bit of a correction on defense to say, hey, maybe we should be, a little bit more of a run funnel, not let Tyreek Hill beat single safety every single time, And so I think there's a little bit of a defensive adjustment that's been made. And I think you'd rather see, run for 4, run for 5, run for 4, run for 5, than, just bombs away touchdown, and, let them earn it, let them have a few third downs. Let's see if we can stop them. So yeah, I think that's kind of been a little bit of part of this as well, which when does that sort of swing again? Right. I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not smart enough to tell you when, but as we see, these things tend to be, evolutionary, and they kind of go in waves along with the league. And we saw pass volume go up, up, up. We saw, all this ADOT go up, and now it's coming way back down again. So you sort of see these changes over time. So I wouldn't be too over my skis, as you pointed out earlier, with the running backs. I think I would be a little bit more neutral with the idea that they're just going to come back and do this again in 2025.
Yeah, I've got some things to piggyback on there. One, we just talked about how most of these rookie running backs were kind of a bust, or we didn't see much of them, right? And so that is, and we were told going into the last draft cycle that this was not an impressive running back class, right?
True.
So there's nobody coming for these guys' jobs, right? That's
True.
one. Two,
Yeah,
and then two, you may remember, I can't help but think back to the offseason again, where we were seeing, after years of teams not giving running backs contracts and guys not being able to sign a decent deal, this is the first offseason in a long time where we started seeing contracts getting handed out left and right.
yeah.
Much bigger contracts. And so the NFL was talking to us, just always follow the money, right? In anything, always follow the money, right? The NFL was telling us, they were communicating to us that running back matters quite a bit, and it's more important now than it has been in a while. And so those two things, I think, were probably signs that we're going to see some of these older backs, which were all part of the great classes of 2018 and stuff, still producing. Go ahead, Jax.
That was another pendulum swing too, because the pendulum had swung so far to the Zeke Elliott contracts and the Todd Gurley contracts, which were like, what were they, like 6 years, 80 million guaranteed or some shit. These contracts were onerous. You said they gave out big contracts. What was David Montgomery was like 3 years, 18 million or something. I don't even know, like 18 million guaranteed. The Josh Jacobs deal was basically what, a 2-year deal? Was it a 4-year, but really a 2-year? So these contracts were, what was Joe Shane?
Mixon?
Joe
Mixon
Shane was
one?
complaining. Yeah. Joe Shane was complaining about paying Saquon Barkley $12 million, for 1 year or whatever, and he's like, it just took 10 years off my life. I mean, that whole thing is the most embarrassing, thing that I've ever seen in my life. But ultimately that percent, that 12 million as a percentage of the total cap was way less than than it was 10 years ago. So, we're looking at the 12 million as a raw number, but all these contracts were also way easier to get to dole out. So, that's another, sort of shift again. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So I got some data that I want to just drop on you and the listeners, and we
The
can.
listeners
I
love
think
data. They love it.
it really hammered the point home. All right. So excluding the Monday Night Football game this season, there were 718 less offensive plays through 17 weeks than there were in
Wow.
2024.
Hmm.
Right.
Wow.
Neutral pass rate was down 2%, and obviously neutral run rate was up 2%. There were 31 more running plays this year than there were in 2024. But based on what I just said, what does that mean?
So a
700
lot
plays
less
disappeared.
passes. Right.
Yeah, 700
Mhm.
plays disappeared, and almost all of them were passing plays.
Yeah.
So the pie got smaller, and the running backs piece got bigger.
Right.
We just had an objectively terrible running back class, and maybe that's a little too harsh.
No, but that's
And
true.
we're also about to have the best one since, I don't know, 2020 at least. So just talking about pendulum swinging and these older guys, this is sort of what I was thinking about is like, yes, okay, we got a little renaissance from a bunch of these guys, but the young bucks are coming,
Yeah.
and the league has sort of shifted. And this is the point of the segment, right? Is it going to continue? What will be the counterpunch to what defenses have done with these too high looks? I'm not sure, but I think we got to take it really seriously. I talked about this in Dynasty Macro and Micro early in the season, and I kind of stopped writing the weekly article because there's nothing left to talk about. This was what the league had become. so
True.
so there was nothing new to analyze, right? It's like, oh well, guys, this is a running league now, and hope you got good running backs. I did a bunch of zero RB. All that being said, though, the evidence is telling us your running back's going to be more important. We're going to see them earlier in drafts next season, and it's going to
True.
change the way your first couple of rounds look. And my instinct is to go the exact opposite direction. Just go harder at zero RB than I've ever gone before in my redraft
Yeah.
leagues, because I think the values are going to shift. And again, we'll see the pendulum swing back towards zero RB, but the data is telling us not to do that.
Yeah. See, I think the way I'm kind of attacking it is I'm kind of trying to stick with the elite players in these offense. We've seen the guys that are getting these big pies are the Saquons, the Derrick Henrys, the guys that are getting a lot of these touchdowns are these elite guys. So I'm not necessarily attacking running back harder because of it. I'm more so trying to accumulate the guys who are elite or maybe have that elite upside, like some of these running backs that we thought we had in this class. For me, a guy like Jalen Wright in that Miami offense has that Jahmyr Gibbs potential upside if he can stay healthy and get some workload in there. So for me, I'm looking for that explosive upside on smaller carry totals potentially, or that really elite guy, because I'm kind of with Jax on the fact that I might differ from you, Joe, in the follow the money thing, just because these are those guys that teams are willing to stake their entire running back room on. And with the cap going up so high, it's not as terrible for them to be giving that kind of money. I think they're going to be more willing when they see that proven elite talent, which is what we kind of saw out of these guys with that track record. So I think it's pretty interesting. It's just, for me, I'm not really attacking it too much differently because of it. It's more so just trying to make sure I compile some of those guys with the elite ceilings, which we're always trying to do, but maybe trying to do a little bit harder and maybe a little bit earlier when we're talking about those guys like Jalen Wright, maybe Blake Corum as well as a guy like that. Try and get these guys onto your roster sooner, and don't just not put those offers out because he's a young guy that you think that other manager is just going to be holding on to and not giving up. Throw the offer out there, try to get something done, and see if you can stock that room with those elite guys. And if you have 3 or 4 of them, then you're kind of set, because it's important to note that we're still in 3 wide receiver leagues. We still have to start those 3 wide receivers. So we can't go too heavy on running backs, or else we're going to leave ourselves in very, very vulnerable positions, especially in the flex, but probably in that wide receiver 3 as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the thing that's interesting is, I was saying follow the money in terms of like a clear signal we were getting this past offseason, but I don't think we're going to get anything like that signal this year, because I think that this year's free agent running back class is pretty weak, actually. So it's
Yeah.
not like something you can bank on every year. And we'll get into this more later in the offseason. But I don't think there's going to be many answers for teams looking for running back outside of the draft.
As always, the idea is, sell a running back at the height of his value and buy running backs at the bottom of their value, because almost always, J.K. Dobbins, Bucky Irving, you can go down the list. I mean, even, Saquon was, not exactly I saw him being sold last year. I mean, even before the season, he was a 2-3 turn guy in redraft. Like, people were like, I'm not sure. And then he started moving. He moved up big time. But like, people weren't sure because of touchdown upside with Jalen Hurts tush push. It was like, dude, he's a running back in one of the best offenses in the league. It's going to be awesome, So as always, just buy low at running back, sell high at running back, because it just changes quickly. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, fellas. So the next one, and Joe, you were gracious enough to throw these into the show sheet. So thank you for firing that stuff in there. And the next one that you put on there was CJ Stroud. It was quite the precipitous fall for CJ from year 1 to year 2. I've documented a bunch throughout the season, actually, on the True North social media, just the steep decline in deep passing that we've seen from him. And I don't necessarily have the updated numbers right now, so I'm not going to rattle off numbers from a couple weeks ago, but it has been alarming. So go have a look at that. But what do you think, Joe, about CJ Stroud? Is it going to be a new year, new CJ in 2025? Or do we think this is something that we might have to get used to, because he hasn't been the same guy that we saw last season?
Yeah, well, as somebody who has a portfolio with 43% CJ Stroud, it's definitely very important to me. um, I thought I was sitting pretty for a long time in a lot of these leagues, and now I'm looking for answers. And I already started in season to find potential answers. And so I don't know. Last year in terms of variance, it definitely tilted in his favor. This year, it's really swung back the other way. I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. It's not as good as it was last year, not as bad as it was this year. It could be scheme related as well. But I think what it really forced me to do as a dynasty manager is go get more quarterbacks, right? Because lots of quarterbacks have years like this where they have a bad year. Patrick Mahomes, we talked about it earlier. And then there are other years where they do fantastic. And so just having more options, particularly in that archetype, right? Where it's more of a pocket passer, right? They tend to run a little hotter and cooler than the running quarterbacks do, who have that bankable floor. And so when you have a pocket passer, you better get a couple more pocket passers, and then just it's going to be a yearly thing, right? Some years it's going to be Dak for you. Some years it's going to be I don't know. Kyler Murray's not a good example, but CJ Stroud. Some years, yeah, Cousins. Your Trevor Lawrence's, right? So if you have a pocket passer, you want more depth at the quarterback position, just to combat the variance that comes with team situation and just cold streaks, right? And that's kind of what we're dealing with. I haven't lost faith in CJ Stroud as a player, and I still think we're going to see those heights again. But boy, it was not a fun ride this year.
I think about guys like Joe Flacco and the hot streak that he got on to finish last season. He's at the bottom end of that, but those are guys that I'm even stacking as well. Like, I want 4, 5, 6 guys on my team that have at least only a starter in front of them as the path to some starts for me, because those guys can happen and they can give you that meaningful 16 points that you need for any given week. And Joe, I'll just finish it off with this before I pass to Jax, that I'm totally with you on kind of not fading CJ Stroud just yet. I think your points about him being that non-rushing quarterback are good. And I think he's going to continue to be an elite non-rushing quarterback is kind of what I say. Those guys that are kind of right behind that tier of having that extreme ceiling. He is in that and probably at the top of that tier. I think the problem with those guys is the perception, like you said, swings really high or really far, because those guys need like 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns a season to be getting that top 5 fantasy quarterback because of all the rushing that's happening. So I think it's about perception and expectation as well. What you expect from CJ Stroud is not necessarily a top 5 season. That's more of a cherry on top. You're expecting him to be between that 5 to 9, 5 to 10 area. And that's what you should be getting from him. So I think that's what we'll get going forward. And I think all it's done is maybe create a little bit of a buy window for people who are fully fading.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like Joe Burrow last year versus Joe Burrow this year, right? Joe Burrow had the nightmare season last year and then just caught on in fuego this year, right? Anyways, Jax, go ahead.
That was what I was going to say. I was going to say, trade Joe Burrow for CJ Stroud plus. That's kind of the
Yeah.
what it's
Yes.
telling you to do now. I mean, that's maybe that backfires, but ultimately the process tells you to do that because I think CJ, you got to remember too, he lost Diggs, lost Tank Dell, lost Nico. I mean, he basically had all three of his top, wide receivers hurt at some point, sometime together, so he never really had his full complement of weapons and he didn't look as good. I mean, he did make some really, really awful looking throws here and there. And it's like, I sort of nicknamed him Dot because every single throw is just like, he dots everybody. This year it was like a lot of throws that were not dotting anything except the sideline. So,
Mhm.
I think, I don't know, man. I think that's kind of your point. I think it falls somewhere in between there. I think he'll probably have a little bit more certainty with his weapons and he'll be better than he was this year and maybe not as good as he was, in his first year. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, at quarterback, I feel like you want to just run into the burning building, right? I traded for
Good one.
Trevor Lawrence in the league. I have Stroud. I traded for Trevor Lawrence this year, right? Give it to me. I
Yeah.
mentioned that trade I did for Thielen where I got Tyrod Taylor. I was like, let me get a Tyrod Taylor on this team
Yeah.
as well, right? I was just like,
Yep.
let me fill the quarterback room because I'm concerned about this position. I don't want this to happen to me again because that was the difference in that team, making and not making the playoffs is just struggles at the quarterback position. The rest was set. And so I knew that's what I needed to fix.
Yeah, you made me think of my other point that I had forgotten because I'm old. Was the idea of roster construction? I've got a number of teams where I've just looked down. I'm like Drew Lock, Josh Dobbs. All these guys that are just backups. Mitch Trubisky, etc. It's like I'm totally fine with it because one of those guys was Sam Darnold, one of those guys was Baker Mayfield, one of those guys was Geno Smith at one point in time. So you look down and all of a sudden, right? All of a sudden you've got a starter sometimes. So yeah. Yep.
Okay, boys. So I'm going to take us into the last kind of trend that we are spotting here, and that's talking about these rookie quarterbacks. Joe, you mentioned earlier in the show that we had one of the best quarterbacks classes that we've seen of all time. I'm going to
For
give a
sure.
list of some of these quarterbacks, and I took a little bit of a different approach to this one. I'm going to fire a couple questions at you guys, and see what you guys think, and we're going to talk about your takes on it. So the list of quarterbacks that were drafted in that first round, of course, Caleb Williams at number one, Jaden Daniels, your boy Jax, Drake Maye, then JJ McCarthy. Unfortunately, didn't see him in action. Michael Penix just got his second start for the Falcons and looked better than he did in the first week. And then Bo Nix, who has actually looked awesome, guys. So I'm really
Mm-hmm.
excited to kind of unpack these guys with you. But I'm kind of going like a little bit superlative style. So I want you guys to take those six quarterbacks I mentioned. And Joe, we're going to start with you. Who is most likely, and maybe this question's aside from Jaden Daniels, who is most likely to be a top 5 dynasty quarterback sooner rather than later? Because I think it's fairly safe to say that Jaden Daniels probably is in that category. Lots of it is due to his rushing. So maybe those other 5 guys, who is most likely to get into that top 5 with Jaden?
Yeah, I'd say I think we have to exclude Jaden. He's already there. It's Drake May, one, clearly.
Yep.
Uh, and then two, I'm probably I don't know if this is just because like mystery box, but and I'm not going to the JJ McCarthy route, but I'm just saying Michael Penix. We've only seen 2 starts out of him, and I feel better about him than I feel about Caleb so far, which is unbelievable from where we were, 4 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Then Caleb, then Knicks. Then I don't think we're going to see Knicks really in the top 5
No.
realm. I think he's going to be, in that 8 to 12 range. And then, JJ, we'll see. Fingers crossed. I love him. Hopefully he has a job when he's healthy.
No doubt, no doubt. What an influx of talent we've had to the position, though. It's very, very exciting going forward. So, Jax, how would you see that in comparison to Joe's list there? Drake May definitely is the next guy in line for me. A lot of that rushing, a lot of Josh Allen I see in him, and we talked about him at the top of the show. How do you see it, Joe or Jax?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, Drake May's on the edge of top 5 dynasty quarterback for me right now. I mean, you have to put him in there with CJ Stroud and Justin Herbert and Jordan Love. for sure right now. I mean, just because he played so well, and he had huge rushing upside, and I think when his team is better, that rushing upside will turn into rushing touchdowns. He had a few picks. He had 10 interceptions, which is not a ton, but a lot of them were downfield trying to win a game late. I don't know. Who
Take
begrudges
it.
that? I mean, you're down and you're just trying to throw a deep ball, like a 30-yard ball to try and win a game. That's fine. He didn't have a lot of mistake throws. He was north of 66% completion percentage, and he was throwing down the field. And he had arguably the worst offensive line in the league with almost inarguably the worst weaponry in the entire NFL. So Drake Maye, unless we see some major regression, I think is the easy answer there.
I like it. Okay, this one's really good because it's going to be a bit of a thinker. So after next season, whose value will change the most, for better or for worse? Whose value is going to change the most after next season?
Are we talking about these quarterbacks still?
Yeah.
Okay. After next season.
I'll go.
Okay,
I'll go. It's going to be J.J. McCarthy, I would think, because one way or the other, I mean, either he's going to – because right now, I think people think he's going to be a starter, and if for some reason he isn't, his value is going to tank. And I think people do think he's going to be a starter, but they're a little tepid. But I think if he can get that Minnesota starting job, holy smokes, his value is going to go through the roof. So I think, with a couple of different outcomes for J.J. McCarthy, his value could absolutely just go up or down.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think that's right. And the other one is probably Caleb Williams, right? Because exactly everyone's going to give him a pass for this year. They're going to blame Eberflus. They're going to say it was a bad offensive line. The excuses started, a couple months ago, right? And they continue to go. And so everyone's going to be willing to write it off. But if he has a bad year next year too, he is going to plummet. So I think those two are the most obvious answers because JJ could go either direction, but Caleb can, started so high that he can drop the furthest.
Yeah, I think Drake Maye belongs in that group as well, just due to the variance in his profile and some of the trepidation that we had on him maybe coming into the draft, and some of that stuff could potentially be real. And so if we see that team restock, I hope not. Trust me, Jax, I hope not. But I just think he has kind of that backyard style that could see a cliff very quickly if we see it. I don't want to see it. I like him. I have him on some teams, and I really want him to be what we know he can be. All I'm saying.
I mean, if there's someone who's going to see a cliff, it's Jalen Hurts, pal.
I'm not trying to bum you out or make you throw insults at this, what's that, 13-3 team that we got going on? Sorry.
I'm familiar with that record. I had it for 20 years, so.
Fuck. All right.
I'm used to the opposite as a Raiders fan. Wait, real quick, can we just throw Spencer Rattler in the conversation? Can I see him play one game with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed? His best wide receiver has been MVS. I know it's been ugly, but he didn't even get Bub Means for more than a game. Can we just see Spencer Rattler with a competent wide receiver or two before we write the book on him? Yeah.
Good shot at that. That's a good one to throw in there because that value could spike for sure. And I think for me, if that value does spike, I'd be selling the shit out of it personally.
Oh, yeah. I may have a pretty decent sized investment in Spencer Rattler as well. So I definitely want to see him with a real wide receiver too.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah, it's a fun crop, guys. I just think it's going to be really cool to see these guys going forward because some of them do have really nice weapons around them, right? Penix is in a good spot. Daniels is in a good spot. Williams is in a good spot. Drake Maye's potentially going to have a top 3 pick added to the team, potentially a Tet McMillan in New England, Jax. I know that probably tickles your fancy a little bit. So we shall see. Guys, we're going to finish her off with the final segment. Joe, this is another one by you. Shout out to the production work by Joe. You said that I was on the 1s and 2s and that you needed a producer and shit at the top of the show. I think you produced more of the show than I did, I will say. So you have something new and a new concept that you're going to pull up. And I would just like to introduce it first as the Kuvetakis quarterback fuck around and find out scale. And just give me 1 second to put this up on the screen, Joe, and then I'm going to give you the floor, brother.
Well, while you put it up, I'll just say this started as a joke, maybe in the chat. I don't even remember. Maybe we were just talking one day. And I can't believe what a great job you've done with this production. But it was
Yes,
just,
the fuck around, find out quarterback
yeah,
scale is looking really good. The
yeah,
F.A.F.O index, as you
yeah,
point
yeah.
out.
The QB
QBFAO.
FAFO index, yeah.
Yes, yes.
So after all season, just watching Patrick Mahomes, right, just hang in these games, play terrible, throw bad picks, hang in these games, and then go win in the last 2 minutes of seemingly every game this season until like the last 2 weeks. You know, he fucked around and he got Rashi Rice injured. You know, just constantly fucking around. But here's the thing: he never finds out. Patrick Mahomes has he on the FAFO scale, he's a 10 at the fuck around and a 0 in the finding out. And so it just pisses me off as a Raiders fan. I see it every week. I see him not playing great, and I see him winning every damn game. They're going to win the Super Bowl again. This guy will never get his comeuppance.
That's a great
So
point.
so then you know, I mentioned this idea to you guys, and Trav of course turned it into this great chart, and then
Mm-hmm.
of course we were just like, well, who else is on this chart and where do they lie, right? So I don't know, Trav, go ahead.
Yeah. So the next guy, Joe, we
Oh,
talked about it,
yeah,
deliberated in
yeah,
depth.
yeah. This, you know, a couple of years ago might have been a different answer, but I'd say right now the guy who is not fucking around and also not finding out is Justin Herbert. Just thrown 3 picks this year in that Harbaugh offense. Just does everything right. You know, he's got like something like a Josh Allen or Drake Maye profile, right? But in a offense that doesn't want him to fuck around at all, and because they don't want to find out, they can win games another way. So I'd say he's at a 0-0 on the FAFO scale, the FAFO
Yeah,
index.
absolutely. And the next guy, Joe, you called this one out early in the group chat, and I thought it was a pristine call out on your part.
Oh yeah, Derek Carr. It just all he does is find out. This
Yeah.
guy throwing, he doesn't fuck around. But this guy has been finding out for like seemingly forever. He's been finding out since I don't know 2017. Ever since he broke his leg, he's been finding out. And then you know he has done some dumb things running the ball. So I guess in fairness, he definitely fucks around when he runs the ball. I've seen him fumble the ball into the end zone for a touchdown twice. 2 years in a row on the Raiders. This year he broke his wrist fucking around running the ball, but throwing, he's pretty conservative. He'll take some deep shots, but only when it's one-on-one and he's throwing to Rashid Shaheed. And otherwise, you know, but still, he's constantly finding out and finding ways to lose.
Love it. And last, but certainly
This is obvious. This is obvious.
not least.
Let's take a second for the listeners to guess
Yeah,
who
of course.
who is the ultimate fuck around find out quarterback.
The
Who
ultimate.
is yeah? Who is in the top right corner of this chart? You already know
Ding,
the
ding,
answer.
ding. You are right. If you guessed Jameis Winston.
Jameis Winston. God damn, we love this guy.
The QBFAO FAFO index champion for sure.
Yeah. He should change his name to F.A.F.O Winston.
Yes.
F.A.F.O Winston, no doubt.
Oh,
I'm not
got
sure
it.
the Lord will allow that, Joe.
It's so fun while we've got him for however many games we get him for
Totally.
each season. It's such a blast, but ultimately he leads to his own demise because he just keeps just chucking it. God bless him, though. I mean, he made Jerry Jeudy a thing. We had all given up on Jerry Jeudy. He made Jerry Jeudy a thing. That deserves some kind of award. We're going to give him the FAFO Index Champion Award.
I love it. And we got a few more years of finding out with Jameis, too. He's getting some more shots for a few seasons, and so
Yeah.
I'm just here to soak it all in. Jax, we talked about that on Undrafted, too, and he is just magic.
He was fucking around so much and finding out so much they had to bench him. For a guy who I guess what is his, you know, maybe Dorian Thompson, whatever his stupid name is further than Derek Carr or David Carr, all the Carr family, because he has one touchdown pass in his career and 11 picks. And they were like, you know what? Jameis, you're a little too fun for our entire city. We're gonna go ahead and surely lose with this absolute nobody. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. No. DTR is definitely in the Derek Carr quadrant of this graph. He is not
Yes.
fucking around too much, but constantly finding out. And
He
you know,
finds
I
out
love
every
him.
single throw.
My fellow UCLA Bruin, I love him. Think he got a win for us against SC one time, but yeah, I never thought he was an NFL talent, and I'm sorry to say that. We found out enough, I think.
Who are some
And
of the
shout
historical Jameis Winston All-Stars? Like Jeff
Oh,
well, I was
we
George?
just gonna
gotta know
say,
it's magic.
Yeah,
yeah,
Fitzmagic.
Fitzmagic, you
There's
have
another
to.
one.
Yeah,
Yes.
Gardner's up there.
Yes.
Gardner's
Yes.
up there for sure.
Gardner's fucking around and finding out quite a bit for
You know,
sure.
I'll
Definitely.
say Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is pretty high up there this season in particular. He's been finding out a lot, but yeah, people. I
Please
think he's
don't
got.
mention his name in this house.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He's got like this reputation as like this check down thrower. He is not. He is a timing based. I'm going
Yeah,
to throw it to my guy, and I don't give a shit kind of thrower.
yeah.
So I think he's up there as well. He's probably like middle of the upper right quadrant.
Brett Favre fucked around and found out
Brett
big time.
Favre.
He
Yep.
Brett Favre was around well before the fuck around and find out scale. He yeah,
We could change.
definitely
We
fit.
could change the first F to Favre.
Yeah,
Yes.
Favre around and find out. Or fuck around and Favre out. Boom.
That's so good. So
Oh,
good.
guys, I don't think we could end on a better note than that. I am very happy we got to wrap it up with a little bit of fun on this here first episode of Dynasty Underground. Fellas, that was great. I had a really good time talking ball with you. I hope our listeners did as well. We are only going to get better from here. Lots of work to be done in this offseason. Jax, I'm going to give you the floor first to just give any parting shots to the people with what to look forward to, what you're excited about. Like I said, let's kick this offseason off right, baby.
Yo, Mark Gastineau is gonna fuck around and Favre out himself, I think, right?
That's good. Yeah.
But no, I look forward to this show, man. And you know, I think Joe mentioned it too. There's gonna be a lot of prospect talk and where we get to, have these arguments about, prospects and we'll have the Bucky Irving sort of corollary,
Yes.
layered upon a lot of our conversations about this stuff. I mean, there's just gonna be so many players, and so many running backs that are in this draft class that, it's gonna be almost the draft class is almost going to play itself where late round running back is going to be the obvious play in a lot of these situations. But so much fun. I can't wait. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe, how about yourself?
The whole offseason, yeah, I really feel like this is the season, as far as I'm concerned, right? This is where the strategy takes place. This is where the moves are made. This is where we get the edge on the rookies and kind of, looking into the crystal ball of what the league is telling us and figuring out how to build our teams. That starts now. And it's my favorite part of this game. So
Yeah.
that's all I got.
I love it, man. Yeah, I'm excited as well. I'm excited to bring it to the people, bring it to the Undroppables airwaves. Make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm thankful to be podcasting with you guys. I told you guys before the show that there's a lot of times where I don't necessarily put structure or meaning around my process, but that's something that you guys do a lot. And I know that, chatting with you guys and podding with you guys makes me think about that stuff a lot more. And it really helps me as I kind of approach the off season. And like I said on this show, maybe approach in season fantasy football as well. So I thank you guys. I feel pretty lucky to be able to host with both of you. There might come a time where Wiz joins us as well. So stay tuned for that because we love picking his brain as well. The freak in the spreadsheets, as I used to call him. So lots to come for Dynasty Underground. We are super excited. Shout out to all the team working hard. Follow us on the socials at the Undroppables. Find the 3 of our socials down in that description as well. Make sure you subscribe and leave a comment and let us know. So for Jax Falcone, for Joe Kuvetakis, I am Travis Seel. Until then, this has been Dynasty Underground.